Alright, hello everyone. You might wonder why I have all this yarn and knitting here, and that's because I wanted to talk about these needles right here. These are some wooden knitting needles. They're double pointed, and you use them for small circumference projects like making sleeves or socks or something like this. Now these are size 5s. I have already knit an entire sleeve with them. You can see here, and I enjoy it quite a lot. This yarn, if you're curious, I got on sale. It's Premier Yarns from the Deborah Newton collection. Apparently I got them for $2.99 at Biscayne. I don't know how good a price that was. It seemed like a good price at the store that I was at. And it's also a very fluffy yarn. I think it's like a woolen spun, so it's the wool is to the side as you're spinning it, whereas a worsted spun, the wool is aligned, and then when you spin it, it's much denser and tighter. So this is a fluffier kind of yarn, but that's totally fine with me. So that's what I've been working on. So I'll do a little knitting sample so you can see them in motion, hear what they sound like. Thanks, plant. You can move along now, and see what they're like. So the kit that you get, it's $20 for, or something like $20, maybe it was like $22, for 5 needles. These ones were called Ebony. I really liked them. I was worried that with squared needles that the edges would be pretty sharp, but honestly, I mean, I almost don't even notice that they're square, if that makes sense. Like when you're holding them, of course your hand naturally rests on the edges, but rolling them around your fingers does not bother me at all. It's very gentle. The corners are very smooth and curved, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They have a fairly long taper for the point, which is fine. That, I mean, I don't necessarily need that for a yarn like this, but it hasn't caused me any problems either. And for people who, you know, do a lot of sock yarn, or maybe if they're interested in doing complicated stitch patterns, having a longer taper can be really helpful. And it's not the longest in the world by any means. It's just perhaps because they're already a bit narrow to begin with, it seems longer than what I'm used to. I wanted to get the squared needles in a smaller set like this before getting a full interchangeable set. That was kind of the dream, is to get the full interchangeable set of squared needles, because I get joint pain quite often in my hands. That might come from years and years of playing the flute. That might also come from my chronic illness, which often causes joint pain. But either way, having squared needles is supposed to be a lot easier on the hands. You don't have to worry about the needles sort of sliding as much. Having them be made out of wood is also a benefit, because again, the yarn is going to grip to the needles a little bit better than it would to metal, and so you have less effort that you have to put in just managing your materials, and you can spend more of your emotions and your energy and your muscle power on actually doing the knit stitches, instead of like holding the stitches onto the needle and balancing and all that stuff that, you know, a lot of times you don't even think about after you've learned how to do it. But if you can avoid extra work, why not? So I got this set. I needed a double pointed set that was about size 5 anyways to do larger yarn projects like this. So I have some double pointed that are hand-me-downs, that are these, you know, really tiny size 1 aluminums that are all bent out of shape because, you know, after a few years, you end up stepping on or sitting on these little metal needles. So these wood ones I'm really excited about. They're nice and straight, and they're just the right size for slightly larger projects. I've just finished the exciting colorwork section here, so I'm going to cut off the dark brown color, and we can get going with the tan color, right? So when I got to the wider circumference of the sweater, I did need to throw in that extra needle. Some people also, even if they're working in a small circumference, if they're cabling, they might choose to use the 5th needle. If they're making mittens, for example, and you want to hold those thumb stitches on a separate needle, they might want to hold it on the same needle. So that's one reason to have 5 needles in a set. Also, you know, if you lose one, if you can get by with 4, but you've lost a 5th one, well, then that's good news for you, right? All right, so let's start with some English style knitting. And I am trying to use light tension on this yarn because they are sleeves. I don't want them to be too tight. You kind of want to have the ability to block these out a little bit in case, you know, you want to wear a thicker shirt underneath. Now, since moving to New York City, I have discovered the magic that is the long-sleeved undershirt. I've gotten some at Uniqlo, the Heat Tech that they have there, and I've gotten some at Muji, and the ones at Muji I like because they are 100% cotton. So they're just using the knitted material to make it stretch as opposed to adding extra elastane or something like that. So I like those a little bit better. You can hear they have a nice satisfying click. Right. For this next needle, we can swap over to continental style in case that's more your bag. Now again, whatever yarn combination that you use with these needles might be more or less effective. But I've found that they're highly polished. You know, sometimes you get like a cheapo bamboo needle and it's got a bit of grip to it in that it starts catching your yarn. I have not noticed that with these needles, and this yarn is pretty catchy. So I think perhaps I just have a bit better behaved grip with my continental style, and I'm not clacking my needles as much there. Oh, I was supposed to do an increase. So you can see that it's quite splitty, this yarn, with these long tapered points. I just grabbed that. But it does give you the benefit of, if you want to do increases and decreases, like little complicated stitches like that, that it makes that a little bit easier for you. So one thing that I've noticed that's changed about how I hold my needles since I've swapped from using the from the cylindrical, that's the word I wanted. Since I've swapped from using the cylindrical needles to the square needles, I hold my needle like this. I'm more balancing, I'm not really gripping it. I'm balancing it on this part of my fingers, which means I'm not pinching my hand quite as tight. There's not as much pressure. When I'm holding the cylindrical needle, I should have brought one with me, but when I'm holding that, I'm generally putting all the pressure on these 3 fingers at the top, maybe the 4th finger, and that's kind of, if I add the 5th, it's all on the top. Very much like playing a flute, actually. And so it's all up there at the top. Now with a flute, you're kind of balancing the instrument on your thumbs, honestly. But with knitting, you're kind of moving so dynamically that you really have to have contact at all times and fairly tight grip. with these ones, one thing that I love about it, especially with this fluffy yarn, because it stretches quite a bit and you don't need to really pay attention to your tension, is that you can see here, I'm kind of gripping it and like counterbalancing it between the back of my hand here and the middle finger, and the other fingers are kind of just hanging out. But I'm not really, like I have my finger here, but I don't need it, which is really something that I have not experienced in knitting a lot. Usually you need a lot of guidance right at the tip of your needle. And here with these needles, I don't feel that at all. And I feel like I have just as much, if not more, control, which is really exciting. So I'm really satisfied with these needles. If this maker did an interchangeable set, I would definitely get it from them, because, you know, whenever possible, I try to order from, you know, small businesses or people doing handmade stuff. So let's bring a piece of white paper over here so you can kind of see them. And sorry, project, just gonna have to deal with it. It's wool, it'll be fine. All right, so you can see them here. And yeah, it's just a very pleasant tool, definitely an upgrade. I would highly recommend, if you haven't tried squared needles yet, to try them. Yeah, if you haven't tried squared needles, I would definitely recommend trying them. I think I've really enjoyed these quite a lot. They're very lightweight. I almost worry about them getting worn down because they feel so smooth and soft, but they don't bend at all. However, I know that for some people, the stiffness of whatever this wood is made out of would be bothersome. So if you're looking for a really flexible knitting needle, they do have, I believe, some pine knitting needles, and I can look this up later and add, you know, a link, and you can check out their Etsy shop as well. I'm not getting sponsored for this review, by the way. I just looked around for squared needles and double pointed ones, and I came across this site. So yeah, they have a couple different options, a couple different woods that you can use, but the ebony is going to be a little bit harder wood, so you don't have to worry about it wearing down quite as much, or, you know, bending or whatnot. But sometimes people want the bend because it offers extra flexibility. So if you're a particularly tight knitter, then maybe you want to bend your wood. Another thing about the squared needles is that because you have this squared edge and this long taper, it makes it quite easy actually to grab the stitches from the needle. So I'm not a particularly tight knitter. I'm going to try to get Zach, who is, to test them out and let us know. But yeah, I found it's very easy to pick up stitches with these needles as opposed to the cylindrical needles that I've used in the past. So would I buy again? Absolutely. I love this seller. I love this product. And my only concern now with getting a full set of double pointed wooden needles is the tip length, right? Because the interchangeable ones are going to have a cable that runs off. And originally I thought I wanted actually quite short ones, because I do like being able to work in small circumference. And I thought, okay, I'll convert like everyone else is doing and use the circular needle for my small circumference projects. And for that, you'd need the really short points. And at the time, you know, I had only used those cylindrical needles for doing those small circumference things, and I was holding them way up at the front here. But since I've started using these, and I'm glad I tested these ones out first, and using the back of my hand really, and my whole hand to kind of move the needle around as opposed to my fingers, I might want to get the longer distance. If you have gotten a square set of interchangeable needles and you've gotten the short or the long, please let me know what you thought of them and what you would recommend. As far as I'm aware, there's only 2 main sets that are basically manufactured by the same company that are square. I really do like the wood has a grippiness to it a little bit. I think that overall that's going to make my knitting easier and more pleasurable. Also, that clacking sound is great. Some people, everyone has their own pet peeves and likes, and I really like the click-clacking of wooden needles, but some people, maybe they prefer the metal ones or no clacking. So do what works for you, but for me, this is great. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend, if you haven't tried square knitting needles, to maybe find a project that you don't have a needle size for already and get square needles in that size, like I did here. Or consider getting them as a gift for someone and then like testing them out before you give them, something like that. They're very nice, and I've knitted a lot longer than I typically do at a time with these knitting needles, so that's been great. One day I will get the interchangeable set. For the moment, I'll get by with what I currently have, which is sort of a random allotment of circular needles that are not interchangeable, and some more hand-me-down needles that are, a mixture of plastic and metal and wood and kind of all higgledy-piggledy lengths. And, it's great to have so many options, but it would be nice to have something that I just know I have every size for, and that I know that I have the flexibility to change the length of. But also, you could say that creativity does love limitations sometimes. It's sometimes nice to have boundaries that you work within, like the format of poetry, and having a certain sort of rhythm or meter in your poetry can help push you to come up with new combinations that you might not have otherwise come up with. So I'm trying to take that perspective for right now. And when I have a little bit of extra cash, I will definitely invest in some square, circular, interchangeable needles. But for now, I'm just very happy to have these ones right here. So if you have been considering getting square needles, I would definitely recommend it. Especially if you've never tried doing double pointed knitting before with the needles aligned like this. This is the way that I learned how to knit in the round, so I'm very comfortable with it. But even I recognize that it's tricky to learn with slippery superwash yarns and slippery aluminum needles. So I would definitely recommend wooden needles. These square ones do kind of sit on each other. They don't roll around. They don't sort of slide out. Like I have to tug it to get it to move. Whereas the aluminum ones, just like you tilt it this way and they all kind of fall down out of your knitting, which is quite annoying. So this would definitely make it a lot easier to learn how to knit in the round, and much more comfortable, even if you already know how, without making it any difficult. Like once I decide that I want to make a stitch, it's very easy to move these needles along. There's not any resistance when I want to move them, but they stay put when I don't want them to move, which is great. So thanks so much for watching this review. I'm going to keep working on this sleeve so I can finish off my sweater, and I'll see you on my next video. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a great day.